Officer Csapo, if you would please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the record.
Police Officer Ian Csapo. Last name is spelled C-S-A-P-O.
And Officer Csapo, how long have you been with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department?
Almost 8 years.
You're going to have to move it a little bit closer. There you go.
And where are you assigned within the unit?
The downtown bike unit. I'm sorry? Downtown bike unit.
Okay. And prior to your employment with the department, could you tell the jury a little bit about your background?
Sure. I was 4 years in the Marine Corps, deployed to Iraq twice, college degree.
Just a little bit louder, sir.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Officer Csapo, did you see combat when you were deployed?
Yes.
Let's get into the good stuff.
Your Honor, I understand the theory is that officers were emotionally compromised at the scene, so I'm going into this officer's.
I'll allow it.
Okay.
Let's not go too deep.
Did you see other soldiers wounded in battle?
Yes.
Okay. Were you under fire at times while you were deployed?
Yes.
Okay. Have you responded to motor vehicle collisions before?
Yes.
Could you say approximately how many motor vehicle collisions you responded to? Ballpark.
Hundreds.
Okay. And did you respond to a scene at North 11th Street and St. Charles Street in downtown St. Louis last year on February 18th?
Yes.
What were you doing before you responded to that scene?
Patrolling the downtown neighborhood, just awaiting radio assignments.
Okay. So I understand some other officers with the bike unit were downtown at the office, but you were actually out on patrol, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and were you patrolling in a Tahoe or were you on a bike?
Tahoe.
Okay. And what, if anything, did you learn? How did you learn about this incident?
It was announced over the radio that there was an accident with injuries at 11th St. Charles. And normally when calls come through, big ones usually have more than one call, and the information gets updated as dispatch receives more information. So as we were responding, we were getting more information that a pedestrian had been struck. I believe it was a code 1 call, and that means we can activate our lights and sirens.
Okay. When you arrived on the scene, what did you see?
Upon arrival, observed several cars crashed and a group of people over on the north side of St. Charles around somebody. It looked like some of the firefighters were there already working on someone.
Okay. And at any point did you learn who that someone was?
Later on in the evening, I approached to see if I could help, maybe provide first aid, but it looked like they had people there. So I immediately began securing the crime scene, putting up tape, and then proceeding with the investigation.
And is it fair to say that the person appeared to be critically injured?
Yes.
Okay. Based on your prior combat experience and your experience responding to other motor vehicle collisions with injuries, can you say whether that made you emotionally responsive seeing a person critically injured?
I saw the victim's face. I didn't think she was going to live.
Then you're a human being, right? Did you see her parents on the scene?
I did. I don't think I really knew that they were her parents at the time.
Okay. You chose not to get involved, not to interfere with what the firefighter was doing. Is that right?
Yes.
What did you do?
I began putting up crime scene tape, trying to isolate witnesses, parties involved, take down information.
Okay. Through your experience before, have you learned how to manage your emotions in stressful situations?
Yes.
Okay. And did you at some point feel that you had composed yourself? I guess at any point did you feel that you were uncomposed?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Did you interview at some point the driver of one of the vehicles?
Yes.
Okay. And could you tell the jury your understanding as to what vehicles were involved in this crash?
As far as I recall, there was a white, I believe a Chevrolet was traveling northbound on 11th, the Audi SUV. I know another vehicle was struck on the sidewalk. There might have been another vehicle, another parked vehicle involved, but I can't recall.
Okay. And did you interview the driver of that white Malibu?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ask her what happened?
Yes.
What did she say?
I believe she said that she was traveling north on 11th when the Audi traveling west in St. Charles struck her vehicle.
Okay. Did she indicate whether she had time to react to that?
Rephrase.
Did she indicate anything with respect to how any details with respect to how that collision transpired?
I don't recall.
Okay. Would it refresh your memory if have you reviewed a copy of the police report?
I have.
Would it refresh your memory to review a copy of the police report containing a summary of that interview?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want you to read from the police report, but if you would just look at this and then let me know when you've had a chance to do that. Having reviewed that report, is your memory now refreshed about that interview you had with Ms. Smith at the scene?
Yes.
Okay. And are there any details that you now recall other details you recall were stating about how the collision occurred?
She stated that the vehicle ran the yield sign and she did not have time to react.
Okay. At some point in the evening, did you have contact with the driver of the Audi that was involved in the collision?
Yes.
Okay. Did you learn who the driver was?
Yes.
How did you learn that?
I don't recall exactly, but I know at one point I spoke with his mother and got his pedigree information. But I believe the first time I met him was in the back of another police car where he was being questioned by another officer.
Okay. At some point and what was the name of that person? The person you understood was the driver of the Audi?
Daniel Riley.
Okay. And at some point was the defendant placed in the back of a cruiser at the scene?
Yes.
Prior to that occurring, did you perform a search of his person?
No. At the cruiser, at the rear of the cruiser I did, yes.
Okay, and that's what I'm talking about. I don't want to go into all of the contents of that bag, but specifically...
Yep.
Officer Csapo, when you opened that satchel at the cruiser, the defendant tell you that's some weed?
I believe so.
Okay. Can you describe the defendant's demeanor at the scene, as you recall?
Calm, collected, not animated.
Okay. And then you actually went to the hospital with the defendant, is that right?
Yes.
And at some point at the hospital, was the defendant made aware of injuries to other persons involved in the collision?
Either at the hospital or leaving the scene in the ambulance. I don't recall exactly.
Can you describe the defendant's demeanor after he was, and specifically, what was he advised about the condition of the other person?
The condition, I believe he was advised the condition was grave, and the victim here was hurt pretty badly.
Okay. And what was his demeanor at that point after being advised of that information?
It didn't change.
Okay. At some point, did the defendant ask questions about the police intent that evening at the hospital?
Yes.
What was the nature of those questions?
One was the nature of any charges, and the other that I recall was if he was going to be booked and released.
Okay. Did the defendant make a reference to the gravity of the situation?
I don't believe so.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross.
So, as I understand, when you got there, you were taken off the scene.
Yes. I thought I did, but it didn't activate.
Okay.
I always double check, especially when around other people, and that's when the camera activated later.
Okay. So it wasn't activated when you were talking to the drivers in the Malibu?
No,
Okay, it wasn't activated when you talked to the passenger of the Malibu?
I don't recall if I spoke to the passenger of the Malibu.
It wasn't activated when you were taping off the scene?
No.
It was not, you did activate it when Marks told you to go relieve Stein, who had had Mr. Riley in custody, right?
Yes.
You activated it so that you could record everything that Mr. Riley was saying, right?
Yes.
And when you took Mr. Riley from the cruiser to the ambulance, you had it activated then?
Yes.
And when you took him out of the cruiser and put him in the paddy wagon and searched him, you had it activated then?
Yes.
he's been washed with an alcohol swab. Does that help?
Not particularly, no.
Okay. So even after looking at that, you don't remember if Stein was saying he was still looking for a driver?
I mean, Officer Stein is asking if he's looking for a driver. I just can't place that exact sentiment.
Okay. You don't remember telling him at that same time, early on in the scene, nobody's seeing nothing?
I said that, yes.
Okay. All right, so you kind of sort of looked around too, right?
Yes, normally, because we don't have the numbers, a scene like that, you have to multitask.
All right. And I want to ask you a little bit about your military, just for a second. When you see somebody, one of your comrades down, and you're armed, what kind of action might you take as a soldier?
Depends on the situation.
You might try and shoot back at the enemy, right?
Depends, but yes.
All right. So you can separate that idea from being at an accident scene and thinking somebody's responsible and not trying to hold them accountable. So I'm saying, are you still going to be objective, sitting there at the scene, knowing that somebody's hurt and I'm supposed to do something as a cop?
Yes,
So you were able to separate that.
yes.
You didn't feel like kind of sort of the military, you got to get your evens.
No,
All right. So you're supposed to remain calm and objective.
as best as you can.
You're not supposed to comment that, hey, somebody's like a real charmer at the hospital, are you?
No,
All right. Did you do that?
I did.
Huh? So after you'd been with them all night, you commented to everybody there, all your fellow officers, real charmer, right?
Yes,
So the emotions sneak in a little bit there?
yes.
All right. At some point, did you also offer to help Stein write the report?
Yes,
Okay. And Stein ended up not having to write a report, correct?
yes,
So what you had to do was get information to the person who wrote the report, correct?
yes.
And how did you do that?
I don't recall exactly, but more than likely, either a memo or an email.
What's a memo?
Department form, which has a designation you send by email. It's just a formalized letter.
And so that memo that you sent, you're saying you would have sent that to whom?
If I would have sent a memo, it would have been to the, I believe at the time it was a traffic officer. I believe accident reconstruction was handling this case.
So do you know if it went to Moran or somebody else?
I can't recall.
Okay. Now, you did read the report, correct, just a minute ago to help refresh your recollection? And I believe you stated that Elizabeth told you, this is the driver of the Malibu, that he ran the yield sign. That's what you said just a moment ago? And isn't it true that what you communicated to Officer Moran is that when another vehicle failed to slow at the yield sign,
That's what I said. Yes.
which is different than what you just said here in the courtroom, under oath?
If I ask the full statement.
What's the objection?
He's misstating the report if you read the full sentence for context.
I'll allow you to do that on redirect.
She did state that there was no time to take evasive action, and she struck the other vehicle. You're confident that she said that?
my memo.
I don't have a copy of your memo. Do you have a copy of your
I
memo?
don't have a copy of my
All
memo.
right. Is there a copy of your memo still around?
I don't know.
Okay. Let's,
There may not have been a memo, but I can't recall.
what'd you do with your actual notes that you wrote down, people's names and stuff?
I probably handed it off.
To whom?
I don't recall.
Do you remember what you wrote down on that memo?
No, I don't recall.
If you had written down a speed, that's something that you probably would have translated into a report,
I
right?
would never write down a speed.
You didn't write down a speed?
I would never write down a speed.
Do you know if anybody else interviewed her later?
No, I don't recall.
I'm going to kind of wheel this out a little bit to make sure that you can see it. My what? That's it. Can you see that?
Yes.
Make sure it's on. Oh, we lost it. Yeah, scene photos. Scene photographs 1, 2, 3, the ones that you guys put back. Well, I can show them the photos first. So, you're aware that there were scene photographs taken?
Yes.
The scene photographs. So, there's a series of photographs here. And ask if you recognize these. Okay? If you just kind of click on each
Given
one.
these photos a label?
I'm going to give them a letter E, and they're going to be letter E1, E2, E10, E12, E13, E16, E17, E19, E56, and E115.
Maybe you showed me 3 photos.
Here, I'll show you what else. Do you want me to ask another question while I was looking at those, Judge?
Please.
Okay. Officer Csapo, when you were searching Mr. Riley before you put him into the back of the Tahoe or the back of the paddy wagon, one or the other, you were wearing gloves, weren't you?
I don't recall.
I'm going to help refresh your recollection if I...
If I have gloves on, it's generally I usually wear gloves
And what's the reason for that?
just for contact. You don't know what you're getting contact with, safety reasons, basically.
And what are some of those worries?
Sorry.
What are some of those worries? What might you come in contact with?
HIV, fentanyl, blood.
All right. Let's finish. So there's a series of photographs, and if you just click on them one at a time. I'm going to ask if you recognize.
How do I cycle through? Just click.
You can hit use the cursor. You can hit close, but you recognize what's in the line, correct?
How do you close them back?
Yes.
Is it red? Okay. So what was your question?
Well, I'm just asking if you recognize these in the scene that I'll ask you generally when you're going through.
Okay.
Did you ever look at them?
Yes.
Do they look like the scene that night?
Yes.
Judge, I'm going to ask permission in a moment to publish them. But I gotta have my-
Are you asking for them to be admitted?
Yes, sir.
Any objection?
No objection.
Can you say the numbers again of like 1, 2, 3, 10, 12, 13, 16, 17, 19, and 56?
56 and, was there 115 on this one? And 115.
And 115. They'll be admitted and you may publish.
While she's getting that ready. Let me ask you, at some of these accident scenes that you've been at before, have you noticed that cars that are on their roofs and not on their tires tend to travel longer on pavement rather than cars that are still on their tires?
I'm no expert when it comes to car crashes, but I would say that's probably a fair statement.
Okay. There's something called a coefficient of friction. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Okay. And basically, steel on concrete has less or a lower coefficient of friction than does rubber on cement, correct?
I can't speak to that.
Okay. But typically, what you've observed is it's much more difficult for a car to slow when it's steel on concrete as opposed to rubber on concrete.
Objection, just lack of foundation.
Can hear your objection.
Lack of foundation.
You can talk about personal experience. You can answer.
Mr. Dean, you want me to put those photos?
Well, good, yeah. So this was what you looked at in Exhibit 1, right?
Yes.
And this is the Malibu that you were walking around?
Yes.
Okay. And so when she said that she didn't have time to take evasive action, you didn't notice that there were no skid marks behind the Malibu, right?
At the time, no, but looking at the pictures, I don't see any.
Okay. Two. Is that one or is that?
This is one. Do you
Okay.
want the next one?
Yes, two, please. And again, this is kind of a view from St. Charles looking out at the passenger side of that Malibu, correct?
Yes.
And that fairly inaccurately represents the way the Malibu appeared at that intersection, is that correct?
Yes.
At 10. And this is Exhibit 10, E10. And again, this kind of fairly inaccurately represents the fact that the Audi had less scuff marks on the road and continued on down to its resting spot, correct?
Yes.
And you looked at that Audi as well, right?
In passing, but yes.
I'm sorry?
As I walked by it, I didn't examine it too in depth.
When you walked by it, did you notice if there was any front end damage to the Audi?
I don't recall.
Sorry?
I don't recall.
Okay. 12. This would be the front end view of the Malibu at the scene, correct?
Yes.
Looks like there's considerable damage to the front of that Malibu, correct?
Yes.
13. Again, this is another view of that Malibu, again showing considerable damage to the front end of that. Is that correct?
Yes.
16. Again, the back of the Malibu from a little closer distance, not even skid marks behind it. Is that correct?
Yes.
17. Again, another view of the Malibu, not displaying any type of debris left that would be associated with the skid, correct?
Yes.
19, was that 19?
It's,
Looks like all the airbags are going off inside that vehicle as well, correct?
Yes.
Now, in your experience as a guy who's been in traffic accidents before, is it common that the side airbags typically come down, or on a front-end impact, is it typically just the driver airbag and the passenger airbag?
To be honest, most of the time I just document what I see. I actually have never considered that.
All right, 56. Now, this was the back of the Toyota against which Janae was pinned, correct?
Yes.
Did you notice anything unusual about where that car was situated?
actually vague.
Rephrase.
Sure. What's this yellow curve mean?
It would be in a no parking zone.
I'm sorry, what?
A no parking.
So the Toyota was someplace kind of almost in the walkway, right?
Yes.
All right. 115. And again, just, I know this doesn't necessarily give it perfect perspective, but from the front end of the Malibu to where the Audi and off the Toyota, correct?
Yes.
Did you notice anything unusual about the pavement leading into the Toyota?
At the time, no, I did not notice anything.
You notice there's a scuff mark there left by a tire?
Yes.
typically that means the tire is not rotating solidly on the ground, right?
There's a lack of foundation there.
We've been at accident scenes before, right?
Yes,
When tires lock up, they leave skid marks, right?
yes,
When tires turn and the car is out of control, it leaves skid marks, right?
yes.
Nothing else right now.
Any redirect?
Officer Csapo, if you were emotionally inflamed by the injuries to Janae and you wanted to railroad someone with charges, would it matter whether it was Elizabeth Smith or Daniel Riley?
Your objection is sustained. You've raised the question.
Officer Csapo, you didn't perform the accident reconstruction in this case, right?
No,
You didn't come to any opinions about skid marks or scuff marks, right?
no,
Based even on what you said with your experience about skid marks being left only when the wheels lock, the fact there's no skid marks behind the Malibu doesn't mean the Malibu wasn't braking, right?
I'm going to object also.
This goes.
Overruled is the same question you asked.
I can rephrase that. Skid marks are left when the wheels lock and they stop rotating and they slide along the pavement, right?
yes,
And vehicles now are usually equipped with an anti-lock brake system, right?
yes,
So if the wheels don't lock, there's no skid marks in general, right? This is kind of the inverse of what I've asked you before. A car can brake without its wheels locking, right?
I'm going to object, Your Honor.
Overruled is clarified. You can answer the question.
Could you say it again, please?
A vehicle can brake without leaving skid marks, right?
Yes,
No further questions, sir.
Any recross?
But her statement to you was that she had no time to take a big scratch.
Object to outside of scope, Judge.
Overruled.
could you say it again, please?
Sure, what Elizabeth told you was that she had no time to take evasive action, right?
I believe so, yes.
Did she tell you she was doing 40 miles an hour? That's why she couldn't?
Object to lack of foundation.
What's the foundation?
I'm just asking if that's what you said. You said you didn't
There's no
report speed,
basis
so
for
I'm
that
asking.
question.
Hold on. Stop cross-talking over each other. He said he did record a speed, so how would he be able to?
You didn't record it. I'm asking what you said.
I don't recall.
Another.
Would this be excused?
Yes, sir.